Hey, what's going on, y'all? Today, I want to take a minute to talk about how to stop sounding monotone and show you all of the various ways that you can break up a monotonous sound. So, like it says right here, the goal of this post is to help you stop sounding monotone, but first we need to understand what it is to speak monotone. Because telling you to stop sounding monotone isn't going to be very useful, at least not for most people. You can then overcorrect and sound sort of sing-songy, which is still monotone because there's no variance. Then it's just monotone of a different type. So monotone tends to have a connotation of pitch, but there's much more to the voice than just the pitch that I'm speaking at. You can speak at the same pitch or in the same pitch range and not sound monotone because there are more variables, moving parts to the equation of speech and to the voice than just the pitch. So monotone, as it relates to speech, simply means that one or all of the variables are unchanging. So if you change one or some or even all of them entirely, that doesn't necessarily get you out of the monotone zone. For example, if we change that sort of inflection cadence and we don't have any variance when we change that, then it's just way too sing-songy. So the change all has to be related to something, right? Any one of these changes. So we can call that something home base or cruise control. And in each one, and inside of each one of these variables, there is a home base or cruise control for each one. So the variables of speaking that I'm talking about are pace, inflection, resonance, pitch, and then a pause. So these are the variables, and these exist inside of constants, right? If we think about this like it's an equation, variables, constants. The constants are going to be the words you're saying. So these would be the sentences, the words inside of the sentences, and then the syllables of the words. So you find your home base, this true north or cruise control, in each variable, and then you can vary one or some or all of those variables as needed within a constant to match your voice to your message. So the first one that we want to look at is pace. This is a really common thing for a lot of people, is to talk way too fast, to rush through their words. Even if you are pronouncing things correctly and articulating well, have great resonance, and your pitch is natural, if you're flying through your words, it's still going to be tough for you to be understood, for a listener or for the audience or whoever you were speaking to keep up with you, to comprehend what you're saying. And that's one of the first things that we want to keep in mind here, is sort of meta skill or awareness, is that why are we doing all this? It's to be more easily understood, not just understood, but able to be followed so that we can be comprehended, right? So during a rehearsal process, for example, right, all of my background is in professional stage performance and training for professional stage. Even experienced actors have to be reminded to slow down. And this is understandable because they're being natural. They're not trying to seem like they're on stage to the audience. They're trying to seem like the audience is getting a snapshot of something real, right? A look inside of a real life. But obviously, it's acting. So in real life, the pace that we speak to one another in casual conversation is fast. And then beyond just the pace, the words are clipped, or we'd add at the ends of sentences. And then we're also used to consuming stuff really fast, right? I've only ever listened to one audiobook or podcast at 1.0x speed, the power of now, which is really amazing, right? I really wanted to comprehend it, and I wanted to hear every single word and not miss a single point in there. But everything else that I listen to is 1.5x or faster. But when you're on stage or in front of the camera or the podcast microphone or in a sales conversation, you have to do the opposite of what feels natural, at least at first, to be perceived as natural. So using the podcast or audiobook speed as a gauge, your cruise control for speaking, your pace right now, is probably somewhere between 1.25 and 1.5x. So first thing we want to do is lower the speed, and nothing else at first, to 0.9x. Why not 1.0x? because we're tricking our brains, right? So 1.0x, even with what we've just agreed on, still to us comes across as default. So if you're telling yourself, again, this is going to be for most people, maybe there are some geniuses or savants out there. Most people, if you are indicating to them in some way, speak at your default, they're going to be speaking at the speed that they are trying to slow down. So we need to find a new default for these situations. And then once we find it, just practice it and get used to it. So that's why we're going to explore and get used to a 0.9x, or even for the sake of exploration, right? We want to push the envelope all the way and then dial it back, or figure out what the optimal something is for whatever we're correcting, maybe a 0.8 or a 0.75x. So some of the benefits of speaking slow, right? In addition to being able to be comprehended, it's going to be a big safeguard against using filler words. You're giving yourself time to gather your thoughts, which means that you don't have to say like or or any of these other idiosyncrasies that we put in there to fill space. For whatever reason, maybe we are uncomfortable with a natural silence or a natural pause, not something rhetorical. Maybe we genuinely have gotten off of our train of thought, forgotten what we're going to say, or are trying to gather our thoughts, something like that. Like I mentioned, it lets the listener comprehend and follow along, but also it increases status, right? Even if we don't want to be posturing and doing whatever we can to, so I am higher status than you, like look down our noses at whoever we're speaking to. But at the same time, we don't want to do anything that makes us seem lower than we need to be. So would a person in power, or who really relishes in and is aware of their abundance, or who has abundance, would they be rushing? Maybe sometimes, but not all the time, not as a default. But then it also forces you to stay present in the moment of your thought. And this is one of the reasons that we tend to die at the ends of sentences, right? Is because we lose the train of thought that allows for us to drive vocal energy and intention and subtext, etc., all the way through the last syllable of a sentence up to the period or exclamation mark or question mark. Usually it's a period or exclamation mark. That is a more imagination-based, holistic way of maintaining energy through a sentence, not dying at the end of your sentence, which is really important for everything that we're talking about here. There are proprioceptive ways to cue it in, neither here nor there. So once we find that pace, then the next thing that we need to do is we need to establish legato, or line, in the sound. This comes from the Italian school of operatic technique, and it's the basis of a beautiful sound. Essentially, what it is connecting each word to the one before it. I was just speaking in a more staccato way. I tend to default to speaking legato. What this means is that the line, the phonation, is uninterrupted. One way that we can look at this or test this out, one way that I help people to establish this or explore it, oftentimes for the first time in workshops, is just by buzzing their lips with a phonation, or phonating this. If you can do that, keep that sound going uninterrupted, then you've got the basis for legato. Then we just put words on there. So not only is this going to help you avoid sounding choppy and clipped with your words by connecting them all together, but it also lays the foundation for spontaneous variants of these other variables. Even if you listen to what I just did, spontaneous variants of the other variables. It's very aesthetic to do those all flowing one into the other. But part of the reason that singers want to establish legato is, yes, it's for a beautiful sound, but once you have started a sound, once you have started a sound, you are pretty much married to that onset, the folds coming together. So if you don't get it correct, then you have to restart your breath and restart that onset in order to change something. So when you are speaking, if you want to be able to spontaneously, in the moment, change one of these variables, your pitch, your resonance, etc., it really helps to have some kind of legato as a base. Now, like I said, everything is going to be relative to what we are already doing. So if we establish legato as the one of So if we establish legato as the home base or cruise control for how we are speaking, then if we change no other variable, we can break up the monotony by doing the opposite, by speaking staccato. This again comes from Italian School of Operatic Technique, and it means to detach. So if right here I'm speaking legato, and then all of a sudden I want to switch into staccato, I have detached those words from that connected line. So you can break off the line during one of the constants. There I was breaking it off in words. But if I'm speaking very legato here during a whole phrase, then the next phrase that I speak can be staccato. The first one that I did, I was detaching words. But then we can also speak staccato for syllables. Speak staccato for syllables. Syllables. However you want to do it. Now, one thing that really is going to multiply or explode or amplify what you're doing really well with legato and staccato is being able to articulate. So, articulation is the muscular coordination of making the sounds that form words. When you master articulation, it becomes a tool that you can use to play with the sounds of language. So, for example, if you never break your line, you can still avoid monotony by emphasizing sounds with your you can still avoid monotony by emphasizing sound. Uh, uh. Let me see if I can do this without altering anything else. You can still avoid monotony by emphasizing sounds within your constants at the points you'd like to emphasize. For example, if you never break your line, you can still avoid monotony by emphasizing sounds within your constants at the points you'd like to emphasize. All I'm doing there is I am fuck. It's tough to do that without altering any of the other variables. Let's give an example. I'm going to speak totally legato here and then articulate, bring out the sounds of language at a certain point in here while changing as few of the other variables as I can. For example, if you never break your line, you can still avoid monotony by emphasizing sounds within your constants at the points you'd like to emphasize. Little bit of resonance change in there. But nevertheless, I think the point comes across. Alternatively, you can do the same while altering a constant with staccato. Take the word staccato. 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 Fuck. Alternatively, you can do the same while altering a constant with staccato. Now let's talk about inflection through this idea of direction. So, direction of inflection, when most people think about monotone or a lack thereof, they think of variation in pitch, often with the understanding that questions inflect upwards and statements get a downtone. Like we mentioned previously, we might think of the opposite of monotone as melody, but that has this connotation of a sing-songy cadence. Not only does this tend to come across as corny and inauthentic or like you are a newscaster, but it also becomes a kind of monotone itself. Thus, the sing-songy cadence or the melody that we are then breaking up the monotony with, we get desensitized to it, and then it's monotone. So that understanding of questions inflecting upwards and statements inflecting downwards might be handy in a pinch for a few instances, but it's far from the whole picture because questions, even ones that aren't rhetorical, are still understood as a question even if they don't inflect upwards. The same is true of statements and downward inflection. So varying the inflection rarely changes the meaning of the text. I'll read that again and vary the inflection. Varying the inflection rarely changes the meaning of the text. Still the same meaning, right? You get that I'm not asking a question, you understand the point that I'm making. It can, however, be useful in enhancing it or leaving less room for interpretation than would otherwise be there. But that doesn't mean that it's a totally useless rule of thumb, because if we're thinking about pitch through direction, because thinking about pitch through direction of inflection, because thinking about pitch through direction of inflection is helpful, but there's more than up and down. There's also horizontal. Up, down, and horizontal are then going to become the variables in our direction of inflection. So you can apply them to the constants. So an inflection alters the pitch of your voice. An inflection alters the pitch of your voice. How quickly this happens depends on which constant you're varying, the sentence, the word, or the syllable. So it follows then that horizontal inflection isn't going to impact pitch. So then how do we inflect without changing pitch? It's similar to using articulation to play with sounds of language, but instead of highlighting consonant sounds like we did when bringing out the articulation, but instead of highlighting consonant sounds, we're going to elongate vowels in a chosen syllable. I'll use that sentence as an example. But instead of highlighting consonant sounds, we're elongating vowels in a chosen syllable. No pitch change, no resonance change. All I did was just elongate chosen syllable. So there's another level of nuance that can be found in inflection and pitch, and that is the resonance. And the resonance is the sympathetic vibration caused by shaping of the vocal tract, and it gives vocal tone, effect, and colors. These effects and colors are going to provide additional information to the listener's ear about the speaker's point of view or intent. So without changing the pitch, you can inflect upwards with chest resonance and sound declamatory or emphatic. Let me use that sentence as an example. You can inflect upwards with chest resonance and sound declamatory or emphatic. Or you can inflect downwards with head resonance and sound sensitive and approachable. Now, if we do the same thing but the opposite, right, I will read the same sentences but inflect upwards without the chest voice and inflect downwards with chest resonance. Without changing the pitch, you can inflect upwards with chest resonance and sound declamatory or emphatic. Or you can inflect downwards with head resonance and sound sensitive and approachable. All I'm doing is just changing the balance of resonance for each of those inflections. These variations in inflection and resonance are departures from your home base or cruise control in this variable of basically pitch, which would be your natural speaking voice, and that's made up by finding an optimal balance of resonance at an effortless pitch. So you could speak an entire sentence at a higher pitch or at a lower pitch with more head or more chest resonance or a single word or a single syllable in a word, because these are just going to be departures from that natural speaking voice. Now, if we talk about the pause, this is a good way of bringing in, seeing how all of these variables can be shown at once. So like the other variables, a well-used pause on its own can break up a monotonous sound. Also, like the others, too much incorporation makes the listener's ear accustomed to the novelty and numbs the effect. So, when do we use a pause? Before a great point. This is going to magnify and focus attention on what's about to be said. Or we can use a pause after a great point. This allows the point to marinate in the listener's ears and brains and hopefully in their hearts and souls. Silence is golden, but don't give away all your gold. Don't overuse this stuff. Again, back to that sing-songy example. If you do it too much, it tends to lose its effect. So this pause is going to provide several ways to break up monotony. So in all of the constants leading up to it, and then the word or phrase that breaks it, you can combine any or all of the variables previously colored. For rhetorical purposes, or just for exploration, make this preceding constant and the breaking word or phrase as contrasted as possible. So if we want to use silence is golden, but don't give away all your gold. Silence is golden is going to be the preceding phrase. The ellipses there can be the pause. And then, but don't give away all your gold is going to be what breaks that silence. So this is my natural speaking voice, right? Natural speaking voice, natural resonance. This is my good home base, my good pace. So if I want to vary the pace, if I want to vary the pitch, if I want to vary the resonance, I could do it like this. Silence is golden, but don't give away all your gold. We could do the opposite. Silence is golden, but don't give away all your gold. Whatever. You get the point. At this point, then, you can mix and match all of these variables and see what comes out. Now, there we are playing with with both of the phrases. What happens if we want to look at just a word? Again, this is my home base. Silence is golden. But don't give away all your gold. There, we're playing with the pitch, the pace, the resonance, the inflection on golden. And then going back to normal for don't give away all your gold. I think I've made my point. Play around with this, break out of that monotony. And if you want to get a free no-cost assessment of what you're doing, how you can change it, how monotone are you, what variables do you need to change or work on, send me an email, send me a direct message. Let's get in touch. Glad to help you out if I can.